Today in the Chicana kitchen, we're making red chile enchiladas with New Mexico red chiles. This dish is deeply satisfying to make and definitely to eat. So let's get cooking. First things first, we will start by making our enchilada sauce. If you've already prepared or purchased a sauce, you can skip ahead to the assembly instructions. We're making our red chile sauce with, of course, New Mexico red chiles. These are dried chiles, and I have 9 or so of them, whatever adds up to 2 ounces or thereabouts. I'm placing these in a dry pan in one layer, yes. And we're just going to let these toast for, about 30 seconds aside. And what that will do is 2 things. It releases some of the flavor. It kind of activates that. And it's going to help them soften up a bit because our next step will be to remove the seeds and stems. And that works a bit better if the chiles are just a little bit more pliable. Once our chiles have toasted a bit, we will take them and if they're hot, give it just a moment, but you don't want them to get cold again. And we are going to just make a kind of a slit down one side of the chile, just kind of tear it open a little bit, and you'll get a nice hit of red chile smell. And we're just going to open it up and kind of shake some of those seeds out if we can. It's okay to tear these into pieces because this is all going to get blended up anyway. It's okay if you don't remove every single one of the seeds. This is really just something that we're doing for texture. So made a bit of a hash of that one, but hopefully you get the idea. You can definitely do this completely with your hands. There is some heat to these chiles. They're not particularly hot, but there's enough heat that it can irritate your fingers though a little bit, especially if you get some of that underneath your nails and such. So, do be somewhat careful. And then as we get seeds and stems removed, we're going to be soaking these chiles for a little bit in some hot water. Whoops, it doesn't have to be boiling. Just some hot water. It can even be a bowl of hot water, but since we're going to use a saucepan later on anyhow, I'm just going to use that for everything. So this is a pot of water just on very low, and as I get the seeds out of my chiles, I will pop them into that pot and let them soak just while I prepare the rest of the ingredients. So maybe for about 10-20 minutes will be enough. Our chiles are in the pot of hot water, just soaking away. Their seeds and stems are discarded on this plate. And we've put the pan back on still a dry pan. And to that, I'm going to add 2 or 3 cloves of garlic, just whole cloves of garlic, and about half of a large onion cut into rough chunks. And we're just going to dry roast those in this pan just until everything is charred in spots, kind of all over the place. And then we will get the rest of our sauce going. Our onion and garlic is nice and blistered in spots and has picked up bits of that dried chile that was already in the pan. Speaking of the chiles, they have been soaking for about 15 minutes altogether. So it is time to put all of this into the blender. If you don't have a blender, a food processor works great. You could do this with an immersion blender as well. The old-fashioned way would be a molcajete. But one way or another, we're going to get all of this into the blender along with some seasonings. We'll have a half a teaspoon of dried oregano, half a teaspoon of dried ground cumin, half a teaspoon of salt, and a full teaspoon of granulated sugar. We'll be adding liquid to this. We could use the soaking liquid, but it can be pretty bitter. So I'm going to use some plain water, 1.5 to 2 cups or so. We'll see how much is needed for a fairly thin consistency. And one more thing that we'll put in here is some tomato paste. And this is definitely not a tomato-based sauce. It's not going to taste particularly tomatoey, but the tomato along with the sugar helps to round out the flavors in the sauce. You could absolutely use broth or stock instead of the water. If you do so, just adjust your salt and seasonings accordingly depending on how that broth or stock is seasoned. All my ingredients are in the blender jar. I wound up using about 1.5 cups of water. We can always add more later. We're going to give this a whir, and then we're going to return it to that pot. I just poured out the soaking liquid and gave it a quick wipe. No need to wash it though, because we're going to be simmering our sauce in this pot. So while the blender blends, I'm going to put 1 or 2 teaspoons of neutral oil, olive oil, vegetable oil, whatever you've got on hand will be fine, and just heat that on medium low. Our sauce is blended. Do be careful if your ingredients are still hot from the pan. Hot stuff really tends to want to bubble up and out of the blender, so just be careful with that. You don't want red chile on your ceiling. Right, our oil has heated up. It's not super hot. We don't want this to splatter all over the stove, but moderately hot. So we're going to pour our sauce in, and we're just going to let it cook a little bit more for maybe 10 to 15 minutes. And if it starts to thicken up too much, we can just add in more liquid. We want to keep it relatively thin because we're going to be dipping tortillas into it. Our red chile sauce has simmered and it is ready to use, and we have everything else on hand we need to assemble our enchiladas. And that would be a pan with some warm oil in it. We'll turn the heat up on that in just a second. Some tortillas. You can use flour or corn. Filling, in my case, I've got some shredded chicken and a little bit of queso fresco to sprinkle on top. Also, since I'll be serving my enchiladas family style, I've got a greased baking dish, and I'll be putting them in there and then just sliding them into the oven to stay warm all together. We aren't really cooking them in the oven. We could definitely just serve them right after we roll them. So any kind of tortilla, any kind of filling, that's fine. The only real rule of enchiladas is that we dip the tortilla in the chile before we roll it around our filling ingredients. That's what makes them enchiladas. So I've got the oil to toast or kind of slightly fry my tortilla. That's in the pan. I'm going to put some enchilada sauce on a plate with a lip. You could definitely do this in a shallow baking dish, in a pie pan, in a wide bowl, as long as the tortilla will fit in there. All right, and I'm going to bring my oil up to medium. If we flick some water into it, it should sizzle, and then it will be ready for us to just quickly cook the tortillas on either side for maybe 30 seconds to a minute, depending on how hot our oil is. So let that oil slide around a bit. Pop this first tortilla in the pan. And we don't really want this to get real fried or crispy. It still needs to be pliable. So just barely toast it on either side. We'll slide the next tortilla into the oil. Usually the first one takes a little bit longer than the rest. And then definitely make sure any jewelry that you have on, you want to remove that from your fingers, and hopefully you like your fingernails nice and orange, because they will be if you're doing this by hand. You of course can wear food safe gloves instead. All right, so I'm going to turn my tortilla so that it is nicely covered on both sides, on both sides with chile. And then I will be filling that, again, I've got shredded chicken here, potatoes are great in this, shredded pork, beef, any combination of those, squash. You can put cheese inside, sprinkle it on top, or both. All right, and I'm just going to roll that right into my pan. Of course, again, I can do that right onto a plate and serve them that way as well. All right, so there's my first tortilla. All right, I'm going to take this one and do that with your fingers if you're not used to it. All right, and turn it, and we'll keep going until we've got our dish all filled up. My enchiladas are nicely nestled into this baking dish. Got 5 across and 1 on the edge here. I'm going to take the rest of the sauce that's on the plate here, or at least most of it, and just spread that across the top. I can of course do that just as I serve them as well, but I don't want them to dry out in the oven. So a little bit more sauce on these guys. And then once that's done, good. We'll sprinkle them with a little bit of that queso fresco and slide them into the oven just to let the flavors pull together, and again to keep this all warm. You can do this in a pretty low oven. It just kind of depends on how warm your filling ingredients were when you got started. So there we have it. I'm going to cover that with some foil, tuck it into the oven at 300 degrees for, maybe just 10 minutes or so until I have everything else ready to go. We'll see these when they're ready to eat. Our enchiladas are out of the oven and ready to serve. We hope you give these a try and you check back every Friday at 4 o'clock for a new recipe.